Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Night Live with Simon Jacobson. The topic for this class is night vision. How the moon can teach us to see the world in new ways. The reason for this topic is the Jewish calendar, as I often mention, is more than just an invisible, imaginary way of measuring time and having appointment book, date lines and so on, and deadlines. But rather, it is a microcosm and a reflection of each of our lives. Time is energy, and the Hebrew calendar is a reflection of the cycles of that energy in our lives. And this period in time in which we are right now, as I've discussed last week and over the years, is moving from the saddest days of the year to the happiest days of the year. As it is in life, we know life has sad moments and it has its happy moments. Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the Jewish calendar. This was this past Sunday, the pushed off fast after Shabbos, which was Tisha B'Av technically, but we don't fast on Tisha B'Av. Only the positive elements of Tisha B'Av were there on Shabbos. And on Sunday we fasted. And this week, the end of the week, the 15th of Av, the full moon of this month, will reflect the fulfillment of the down and the deficiency of the moon of Tisha B'Av, which I'll explain in a moment. So Tisha B'Av reflects the sad part of our lives, and we move now into joy. Think of a wheel that's turning. So in essence, the calendar is really an opportunity for us to tap into the energies of the moment, and also to ride its waves and learn how to navigate in our own personal lives in every possible way. You know, it's one of the hardest things to do. Today there are GPSs that help us navigate the roads, the turns, the twists and turns. What about a spiritual GPS? You know, we all know life throws curveballs at us. We can't know what tomorrow will bring. You can expecting the best, and God forbid something can happen that you're not willing, and that you're not happy with. Then we have the other extreme. You can have a situation where you're expecting the worst, and then suddenly a great thing happens. Life is filled with twists and turns that are dark and dark roads that don't really tell us what the future holds. So comes the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, and helps us navigate it by understanding that and anticipating that there are many different things that happen in our lives, all different forms and fashions, the vicissitudes and the cycles, the fluctuations, the ups and downs, the crests and the dips of our life journey. So this is a particular opportunity to really learn how to grow and to take our lives and take that type of attitude into learning how to take a challenge, a liability, and turn it into an asset. That where one person sees liability, you'll see asset. Where another person sees that shortcoming or setback, someone else will see opportunity. That's how we have to look at it all. And indeed, I wrote a book called 60 Days, which is very much connected to beginning, actually, the birth of it, the seeds of it are in this month of Av. Even though it's the saddest month, it gives birth to the month of Elul, which will then give birth to the month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. So though these are sad moments, but when you think of it in context and perspective, it actually leads to great highs and has the ability, after breaking, to build reconciliation, which is why I wrote the book 60 Days in a way that is like around the cycle of basically life relationships where we have betrayal, disappointment, and all that comes with that, and then reconciliation. Because the biggest question in life is, can I reconcile after a betrayal? After there's been a violation of trust, after there's been some crack, after there's been a disappointment, shattered dreams, can we rebuild? It's one of the hardest things to deal with in life. It's one thing when things are going well, it's another when they're challenged. And that's exactly what this period in time is about. So the month of Av, its mazel, its sign of the month is Aryeh, Leo. Aryeh in Hebrew is a word that means a lion, made up of 4 letters, which the Shalah writes is an acronym for Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hoshana Rabbah. So essentially the month of Elul, which is the month of compassion, leading into Rosh Hashanah, and then Yom Kippur and Hoshana Rabbah are the 4 elements of joy and rebuilding after what? After the destruction of this month, the destruction of the temple, and destruction in every possible way, psychological as well, that the destruction itself is what builds the reconciliation. So it's not just a negative past and moving on, is the negativity that becomes a seed for growth, which is a fundamental principle in Jewish mystical thought, that it's not just like many of us think of a bad thing, okay, let's get over it, let's move on. The true redemption comes when the Zerim Bedima, that when you sow tears, the tears become raindrops, they become water that nurtures. The Berina Yuktseru, which is that with joy we reap. So the reaping and the joy come directly out of the tears, thus rendering the negative into a stepping stone toward the positive. And this is framed in the context of our period in time. So let's go through it in a little more detail now, that I've opened up the discussion here. Hopefully this can lead us all to find hope, sometimes where it may be seeming a little bleak, or more than a little, to help rebuild after there's been some betrayal, or there's been some form of breach, and any other form of disappointment or negative thing, how to turn that into an asset. And we have, thank God, we have rife with many examples that we can look for in our own lives, and hence the title, Night Vision, to how the moon can teach us to look at the world and ourselves in a new way. Why the moon? So the Arizal, the holy Arizal, whose Yartzeit actually is the 5th of Av, as I discussed in the last class, right in the middle of the 9 days, in his writings, actually they're called Kisvei, the writings of the Arizal, actually written by his student Reb Chaim Vital primarily, speaks about a custom that's done on Tisha B'Av afternoon, by Minchit, by the afternoon prayer, we say a prayer called Nachem. Nachem means be consoled. The obvious question is, we're middle of the Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the year, the temple is burning, and we know now the temple's flames were at their highest Tisha B'Av afternoon. Why do we say Nachem? So he says, because that's the moment Mashiach, the redemption, is born. In the darkest moment, the redemption is born. And that's also why we bless the new moon on the night of Tisha B'Av, the night after Tisha B'Av. Because also for the same reason, which is based on a Medrash and a Talmud, Yerushalmi, that talk about this point, which is interesting, that within the darkest is born the greatest. But he explains now another question in elaborating on this topic. The Mishnah says in the Talmud, we have a statement that says, Loi hoyu yom tovim liyisrael, there were no holidays as great for Israel as Kechamisha v'Asar v'Av v'Yom Kippurim, as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. It's the end of the tractate Tainit in the Talmud. Nothing is great as 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Okay, Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. It still begs the question, why is it the greatest holiday? But you could say it's the holiest day of the year. It's considered a chag, a holiday, and it's greater than any other holiday. I say, you think of holidays as Passover, Shavuos, Sukkot. So, but Yom Kippur is considered. We'll talk about that a little more soon. But 15th of Av, it's almost an obscure day. Most of us have never even heard of the day. It's greater than Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, Purim, Chanukah. So the Arizal asks why. The Talmud gives reasons why it was a holiday. It was a day when it was a day like a Jewish Sadie Hawkins day, where the potential brides would go out and introduce themselves to the men for shidduchim. But why? The Talmud gives different reasons there, that different events that happened during the time of the Talmud, during the time of the Moses, the time of the temple, including the end of the decree that the Jews no longer would have to die on Tisha B'Av as a result of the sin of the scouts, and other reasons given, but still missing the explanation of such a great holiday, especially compared to Yom Kippur, greater than all other holidays. Arizal answers, because it follows, as the full moon that follows, the descent of the moon, the Yerid Gdela, the great descent, and the great Pagam, which we would call blemish, and wound experienced by Malchut, the moon, on Tisha B'Av. Because the moon is more than just a sphere, more than just a luminary. The moon is reflective of the Jewish people. We're compared to the moon, and we count by the moon, the lunar cycle. And the moon, Kabbalistically, represents the level called Malchut, which I often describe as dignity. What was Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is 9, 10, and not 9. It was lacking that one sphere. If you're familiar with the sporadic structure, You have Chachma, Bina, Das, all the way to Netzach, Yisayid, Malchus, and then Malchus is the 10th. 9, but not 10, as the Book of Formation says, lacking the dignity. The destruction of the temple was the bridge. You can have wisdom, you can have emotions, but the bridge to the next world. Malchus connects Atzilus to Biyah, in Kabbalistic terminology, to Bria Yitzir Asiyah, is the bridge that connects one reality to another. And when the temple was destroyed, the Holy of Holies, where the divine presence dwelled for 410 years, and the second temple for 420 years, a schism happened, a split between heaven and earth. Malchus expired. It was nostalgic in the language. Stalkus ha-Malchus. Malchus rose. So the Malchus was the Shechina resting on earth, no longer rested here. So we may have divine expression of wisdom and through Torah and midas and motions through other ways, but the Malchus of the divine presence, that became concealed. That's the 9th of Av. The 15th of Av is a full moon. Moon is Malchus. It teaches us that as deep as the descent was, in direct proportion to that is the great ascent that comes to the full moon of the 15th of Av. More than the full moon of other months. Passover is also on a full moon, as is Sukkot. However, those full moons did not follow such a tragic descent. And in the Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought, every descent is in order to bring a greater ascent. Think of it like that. Every challenge, every setback is meant for you to go even further, greater. The analogy of a dam of water, where the water is rushing at a regular flow, but then when you build resistance, you block it. You don't let it flow, what happens? The water builds up so much pressure that when it breaks through, and the dam itself becomes part of the forward flow and thrust of the water. That's the same is true psychologically when we are challenged and we are not something restrains us. There's some form of restraint or resistance. That's how you build energy. All pressure, all power is a result of resistance. And the resistance, strong enough, creates a forward thrust. That's Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the resistance, a darkness, that the black hole where the moon is diminished, and the 15th of Av is when that moon is repaired. And that repair is a full moon, even though it may look like the same full moon as other months, but spiritually and metaphorically and psychologically, the moon is fuller than ever because it followed the resistance of Tisha B'Av. That's what that Arizal says. Explained by the Rebbe Rashab in a Maimer, in a discourse that he delivered in the year Tafresh Ayin, the Hebrew year Tafresh Ayin, which would correspond to the Hebrew year 1910. And he discusses in this week, discusses this theme and this topic. So let's elaborate a little more on it, on what it means. Let's think practically speaking. There's a sun and there's a moon. We know when the sun shines, it's called sunlight, daylight. The day is born, the dawn breaks. The moon is the domain of the night. So in a sense, you have like two kings, two leaders, two ministers. One minister is during the day, which is the sun, and one minister is during the evening, which is the moon. Now, they're not the same. Even though the moon's light is a reflection of the sun, but it's not like a mirror image, the light changes dramatically. The moonlight gives off an entirely different aura and vibe than does the sun. It's weaker, technically, but it has in it a mystique that the sun does not have. You see two people who love each other, you won't find them staring at the sun, but you look at them gazing at the moon. The moon is connected to night energy, the sun is connected to day energy. What's the difference between these two energies? So on a very basic level, as I mentioned, this daylight, you can see. You see clearly, you don't need any extra light. The daylight is powerful, everything is visible. Psychologically or emotionally, it's a day when it's when the work day begins. It's when we're most alive, we're most functional, where we are at full strength. Night is reserved to what? To sleep. Things lower, the energy level lowers. Even the chemicals within the body lower. That's why we experience jet lag when we travel, and there's all kinds of methods using sunlight and so on. The moon is the domain of the night, and the night is when everything goes into a lull, a type of sleep. Yes, there are night people, there are day people, but nevertheless, night is everything slows down. Of course, technically, it's also darker. You don't see things so clearly. But it's not just the darkness. It's also the mood. It's the environment. And in a way, it's a far more intimate light. Night is a time when you more with your family and home. That's when spouses come together. That's when intimacy often takes place. That doesn't mean it cannot happen by day, but night is conducive for a much more introspective moment. When you're more, when the outer dimensions are somewhat not so loud, and the inner begins to emerge. So let's think about night, nocturnal creatures. The night has its own life, has its own energy, has its own dimension. In the Talmud, actually in that same Talmud, the end of Tainus, it says, Lo yivra layla ela legirsa. The night was not given only to study, to read. More study, not necessarily study in depth, but study on a precursory level. That means night is a time for introspection, it's a time for study, a time for meditation, much more conducive. Both the energy, both the people are not, so the hustle and bustle of workday is not there, and all the other reasons that are associated. Spiritually and psychologically speaking, the psycho-spiritual dimension of it, the difference between night and day is the difference when there is divine revelation. Well, think of it like in a time when your mind is actively at work and very aggressive, like the sun, shining strongly, brightly. And the moon is far more of a receptive type of energy, not aggressive, but receptive. But let's define receptive. Receptive is often confused. Not receptive, there's a giver and there's a taker. Receptive means you're in a mode of absorbing. Now when you think about it, which is a stronger power? To speak or to be silent? To transmit or to absorb? To exude or to take in? To retain? So initially, ostensibly, most people would think, we are at full strength when we're speaking and when we're expressing ourselves, expressive energy. But if you think about it, expressive energy, by definition, is lacking an essential element of intimacy. The deepest things in life are not expressible. So when someone's in a mode of absorbing, of retaining, in a state where they are an intimately inward state, you can say has a far deeper expression of who you really are than your expressive energy. I've often discussed this topic about speech and thought and in general what we can express ourselves. I find an interesting phenomenon. When it comes to talking about superficial things, the weather, sports, other matters that are not fundamental and not life-shattering, you can talk on and on and on. Just open up talk radio and you see what I mean. When it comes to talking about yourself, someone says, tell me what's going on inside of you. What do you feel? You'll find, even with people you trust, not that easy to find words. And the deeper you go, the less words there are. Seems paradoxical. Something so close to you, your intimate self, should be easier to express than superficial things. But the answer is because words are containers. As containers have their parameters. They can only contain that much. So you can contain words a certain amount. If you're a good writer or a good speaker, you can have more energy going into those words. But there comes a point where there's a limit. The words are simply too small to contain that much intensity. We want to express a more intense, a more intimate feeling, sentiment. We create the language of metaphor. Metaphor, precisely because of its lack of defined definition of regular prose, conventional prose, allows an expression that you can imagine more. It's a little more poetic. It's more between the lines. It's the spirit of the words. It's a feeling that you get. But then that also comes insufficient when you go dig deeper. Deeper than no words express. Maybe the word oy vey, or just a cry or a laugh. The deepest experiences cannot be expressed even in poetic language. A song maybe. But then comes a point where it's so intense, as they say, even, God forbid, the worst trauma, the moment of shock, you can't even cry. That's how intense the experience is. It's complete silencing. Again, the direct paradox, seeming paradox. The deeper it is, the less expression. So the way Hasidic thought explains it is because, as I said, containers are limited parameters. They're good for a certain amount of energy, for more energy. So you could have wider containers, as I said, metaphor, just a cry, a song, a sound. But then there comes such intensity that any expression that defies any form of expression, called like kola de lo yishtama, a voice that has no sound. Kol de mamodaka, a very subtle, silent sound, if at all. And in that silence lies the greatest depth of who we are, our intimate selves. So here's the irony. We live in a world where a lot of noise seems to be something big. The less noise, sometimes the most power. The more noise, the less power. In Chassidus, it gives an example, for instance, the human body. What's the largest part of the human body, proportionally speaking? The head is less than a third of the body. The torso, the chest, is almost half the body, and is like more than a third. And the legs, from the torso down, is half a body. It seems odd because the head contains in it the most important of my primary faculties: the brain, the mind, central nervous system, your power of vision, your power of sight, sound, hearing, your mouth, your nose. And yet it's the smallest component. Inside your chest, you have, of course, your heart and your lungs, and you have the liver and the other components, and the kidneys and so on. The legs seem to have the least amount of primary and vital organs. It's necessary, but the person can technically, God forbid, live without legs. So the smaller the part of the body, the more energy it contains, for this reason. Because more quality, less quantity. More quantity, less quality. That's the rule. We see this today. The tragic effects of one mutant cell among 75 trillion, something no one can even see, can be more devastating than the greatest handicap. The power of nuclear energy, subatomic level, cellular level, DNA level, all invisible to the eye, but carries tremendous energy. How could an atom that's so small have so much more energy than all the tanks and ammunition and artillery in the world? Because it has nothing to do with size. We've come to learn that energy is not defined by quantity, it's defined by quality. And the same is understood when it comes to night and day, sun and moon. The sun, if you're talking about in sheer firepower and brightness and light, the sun is far stronger than the moon, obviously. You need to wear sunglasses. The sun is glaring, powerful, intense, consistent. The moon is none of that. You can look at the moon. It's glow, it's melancholy type of glow, it's mystique, it's observable. It waxes and wanes, the moon. Every day it's a different part of the cycle. It seems weak in a certain way when you compare it to the sun. But start thinking about the qualitative power. Then you suddenly realize it's not about its intensity and its strength, about its intimacy. It's the night intimacy. And therefore night vision has a certain power that day vision does not have. Is being able to look at something and not be distracted or seduced by its externals. When you love somebody, do you need to see them? Yes, there's some beauty in seeing someone you love. You reunite with them, you hug them, you embrace them. But when you really love somebody, do you need to see them? You can close your eyes and hug someone. You don't need to see them. As a matter of fact, sometimes the superficial expression on the sensory level can be distracting, which is perhaps why when people really embrace each other, sometimes they just close their eyes. Because you experiencing each other is not defined by the parameters of our five senses. It's like an energy that's beyond the parameters of the containers. And thus silence, an inward energy, an intimate energy, is the domain of the night. So the moon represents a whole different dimension, one that is not really valued in a world like ours. In our world, everything is valued. Your value is based on your wealth, your power, your influence, your connections, your youth, your productivity, your buying power, your social status, how many material possessions you've collected. Do you notice all that? Everyone would love all of that. That's sun energy. It has value, but it's not the true value of a human being. Who are you? Who are you, the newborn child, or the child within? That's not defined by all these externals that I just mentioned. That's night energy. That's intimate, silent energy. That's not quite as loud. And it can be completely silent and quiet, but exerts more power than all those other forces. At the end of the day, what makes people happy? When they're loved, when they are validated, when they feel special, when they feel that they have something to contribute. You can give them gifts, you can take them on trips, you can give them a lot of money. It does not mean that their self-worth will go up. It could be a good distraction, a good drug. But ultimately, what makes people really tick and what makes them happy, what makes them feel fulfilled, is that inner dimension that all the technology in the world, all the gadgets and all the all the possessions cannot never do anything for you. They don't add and they don't subtract. When you don't have them, they don't add when you do have them. When things are going well in a person's life, when the sun is shining, most of us take it for granted. But then when the light dims in our lives, we enter the shadows, either of a loss, a negative experience, or the shadows as we get older and we see we're not as superhuman as we thought we were. We're not all invincible as we thought we may have been. What happens is you start recognizing with maturity and seasoning that there's another dimension to existence that is a dimension that is not at all about external accomplishments. It's about that inner serene place, the place that we began with when we were little children, and all we needed was validation, exploration, free abandon. But then we turn into sun-focused people, sun worshippers, we'll say. Sun worshippers who celebrate and honor only those loud things, the fireworks, where you see everything obvious. And we start losing and appreciating. When's the last time, for example, we've had a conversation with someone, not by text and not by email, just eye to eye? When's the last time you even sat in silence with someone you love, someone you care for? Some of us feel it very awkward. What are you going to talk about? But when you care about someone, and you yourself are secure with your own being, you don't always have to talk about things. There's just being there with someone. There's a certain presence, a certain calm. It's a very rare commodity today. So comes Tisha B'Av, and in the most tragic way, there's a destruction on all levels of the dignity, of the moonlight, of the intimacy. And that was a result of people doing what? People, baseless hatred, sinas chinam, where they just simply despised each other. God said, you live that way, my children, I can't be with you when you're at war. How could I be resting in a temple, in peace with you, when you're not at peace with each other? So Tisha B'Av reflects the worst possible breach, the betrayal of trust, the betrayal in any given way, personally, collectively, anywhere you could fill in the blanks in your life, a disappointment, a setback, as I said, a betrayal, a broken promise, etc., etc. But it's all is not lost. Tisha B'Av, the moon is diminished in a tragic way. He says, Yordei ploi ploim, it descended in awesome ways, in a negative sense. Pella means wondrous ways, but what ploi ploim can be a descent that's so terrible that you call it wonder of wonders, how in a certain form of an expression. But it's on the condition that comes the full moon of Chamish B'Av, the 15th of Av, and that allows you to see, something, you lost everything. No. You lost the externals. Now is the time to realize that if you respect and appreciate the intimate, you'll find that there's much depth in there. So in truth, if the sun was blocked, there's the concept of the sun being blocked, that's a whole different type of experience. Here the moon, the dignity seems to have vanished, but in truth, as we all know, a moon goes through cycles. Just as it wanes, it waxes. Just as it diminishes and is about to disappear, it's reborn. So as the Tisha B'Av moon has been so wounded, the wounded moon is as it's sometimes called Pagam Halavona, the wounded moon. Now that wounded moon begins to lick its wounds, and if you see it through, comes to a point of a full moon, where it begins to shine, not just shine, but shine in its full glory, teaching us that even when all was lost, that full moon, the first time they saw a full moon after Tisha B'Av, you can imagine hope was restored. Very similar to what happened when Moses was in Egypt, and the Jews were in the depths of the depths. Had they stayed even a little longer, they would never have been able to leave that God-forsaken place. What did God show Moses? HaChedesh hazeh, the moon. And that's how we begin counting in Nisan. Now what did he see? He didn't see anything. HaChedesh hazeh is Rosh Chodesh, is the beginning, is the new moon. So commentaries discuss what did he see, and why God had to perhaps show him. Chedesh hazeh, showed him with his finger. But some way he saw the rebirth, and some way faith was restored. And he knew that even in this darkest Egypt, the depravity of the land, after 210 years of suffering, with a moon being completely diminished, it's reborn just as the moment that you see it go extinct, seemingly go extinct. And the same thing with Tisha B'Av. 9 spheres. The 10th is removed because the moon is so wounded. So it's not a dead moon. The 9th of moon, you could see a moon. However, you see the moon in some ways, it's an even a greater wound when you see it. When you don't see it, you could say, okay, it was a complete erasure. Here, you're seeing a moon, but you see the wound in the moon. You see it's not complete. And as such, you may think it's over with. No. It leads to a full moon, and that full moon represents that potentially, and the ability that even in that darkest moments lies, as I said, the birth of Mashiach. The Medrash says, when it talks about it, it says that the month that Yovei Aryeh, which was Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, he was compared to a lion. In the month of Aryeh, in the month of Leo, of and Vihichriv Ariel, and he destroyed the temple which is called Ariel. Because of one of the reasons is because when the flames came down on the altar, it looked like a lion, like a devouring the offering like a lion. And that same month, on condition that in the month that Yovei Aryeh, God, Aryeh Shog Mila Yira, is compared to a lion, will come in the month of Aryeh, in the month of Leo and Of, and rebuild Ariel, the third temple. So the whole thing is on condition. So when a person does not see a moon at all, as I mentioned, that reflects a type of complete loss. But when you see a moon, but you see the moon is wounded, that's a different type of loss, which is a more Tisha B'Av experience. And the condition is that it should rebuild and become the acronym, as I said before, of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Hoshana Rabbah. So what we have here is the power of the night. And that's why in the 15th of Av, the Talmud says the nights begin to get longer. And that's why we start increasing in study of prayer, then, a study of Torah then, because the night was created for study, for introspection, for immersion, for more quiet time. Everything is down, then now meaning the noise of the world, and now you can enter into that inner space called night vision. And there you see some things that you would never see by day. By day, you see certain things, you see certain creatures, plants, other aspects, even of the ocean. If you stand by an ocean during the night, you see a different ocean than by day. You may not see all the details as much, but you see the power, you see the foreboding waves, and you can see sometimes the relentlessness at night seems even more powerful than by day, because by day, there's a lot of other angles, aspects going on. There's the sky, and there's birds, and you can even see ships and so on. By night, you see really the power of the ocean, the night ocean, power of the dark. Now, the dark can frighten us, or it can teach us that the greatest light is embedded in the dark, as King Solomon writes in the book of Ecclesiastes. He writes, I've seen the advantage, the quality of wisdom over folly, like the power of light over darkness. But the expression is Yisun ha'er min ha'cheshech. Sometimes you say the quality of light over darkness. Yes, light is more powerful than darkness. But he says Yisun ha'er min ha'cheshech. That through darkness, you see a light that you can never see in the light. You see people, for example, who've gone through difficult times, and they come out more refined. The most refined people I've ever met are people who've gone through the fire. Now, some people get hurt, and some people don't make it through. But those that do, you find a refinement you can never find, a type of seasoning, a type of, their metal has been hardened in a positive way, a sensitivity that you just simply do not see in someone who has not suffered. Now, no one should know of suffering and no one should know of pain. Everyone should be blessed in a revealed way, only good. But there are dark nights each of us will experience. So you could see the dark night as a frightening experience that terrifies us and doesn't allow us to move on. Or you can look at it as something that humbles us and makes us step back and say, okay, what really matters? What really matters? And discover it within the night. You can discover a power that nothing can destroy. Through night, it's like the Talmud says, we learn that a contract that has been challenged can never long ago be challenged again. As long as you've never been challenged, there's been no resistance, we never know what you're made of. But once there's been a challenge and you've come through it, it's a certain type of invincibility that I can make it through anything. Because that which didn't kill me made me stronger. The pain, the difficulties become of greater power. So there's in that sense a far greater power. The Jewish people are reflective of this, as the moon is. We've seen the worst, and yet we've become a greater people for it. We don't become bitter. We have suffered, but we have not become sufferers. So what has happened is a greater light emerges. Now, of course, this is up to us. There are some people who go through difficult times, and it does hurt them. But that's our choice. I'm not criticizing anybody, and I definitely do not put myself in the shoes of people who've gone through real challenges in life. But I will say that Tisha B'Av and the 15th of Av teach us how to gain night vision. And night vision is more powerful than day vision. It allows you to see and allows you to experience things that you can never experience in the day, especially on a psychological level. When do we see the power of the sun? More than any other time. You never think of it. During the eclipse of the sun. The moon eclipses the sun, and suddenly you see parts of the sun you never see. It's even dangerous to look at, because the intensity of the sun is seen once it's blocked. This is true about many things in life. When we go through a difficult time in life, when we have challenges, you'll see certain strengths can come out from them that would never emerge had you not had that challenge. As I mentioned before with the dam. The intensity of water, the pressure and forward thrust of any energy would never emerge if there was no resistance. Now, this isn't a justification. It's an understanding of what to do with it. So the intense withdrawal of Tisha B'Av, the intense wound and pain that we are still grieving over these thousands, over almost 2,000 years for the Second Temple, is meant to be an impetus, a catalyst, to bring out the greatest potential strength. So the darkness of the Middle Ages, the darkness of everything we've gone through, the Dark Ages, can be seen as Dark Ages, and we move on, and now light now the dawn has broken. Or you realize, no, it has tremendous light, except it's a light that you need to have particular sensitive vision to see its power. I remember in school, and all of us have this in class. We have different classmates. Some of them excel, some of them shine, some are charismatic. And then in every class you have certain kids that are not succeeding. They're failing. Some have handicaps. Some are shy. Some are bullied. Some are weak. Some stutter. And children can be very cruel, as we know. But I remember in my own class that sometimes the people that were the quietest, and you think they're fools, they don't know how to answer, they were always being laughed at. And as the years rolled on, you suddenly discover some of them, I would say all of them, but some I saw, in the dark, so-called, where you couldn't see, they had the greatest strengths. They, for whatever reason, were more shy. For whatever reason, had certain type of impediments. And some of them got over it and shined in ways that no one in the class ever shined. When we look at people, we have to always look, not what you see. What you see is important to know, obviously, but never suffice by stopping where you see. That's what the sunlight shines. The sunlight tells you what you see. That's what we are. But what can we be? Who are we in truth? What are our capacities, our possibilities? That requires night vision. That requires looking at somebody not just at the surface and seeing what they're accomplishing. Not just seeing what they're doing, but seeing what they can accomplish. Great mentors, and I wish there were many more of them, see in someone the potential. They see you. You have such capacity, such potential. And when you have someone that believes in you in that way, that's someone that has that night vision, that can see where others cannot see, because it's right now shrouded in darkness, in shadows. It's in a potential state. It may even be being expressed in negative ways. However, they see the deeper. That's, if you connect to a person like that, you can change your entire life. Your whole life can change in the context of how much you can accomplish, because they see that potential. Now, many times you see people act out. People can be very addictive personalities in the sense they get addicted to things. People are very rebellious, very chutzpah, a lot of audacity. Now, all that can be taken as negatives. Or if you have night vision, you look and see, 1 second, that's the sun that tells me that's a negative, or it's over the line, it's out of the pale. The night vision will tell you what lies beneath the surface. Why does this person have so much energy? Why do they have so much audacity? Why are they this way? I remember a number of years ago, I was learning with someone on Skype from Europe, and he told me that he had met up, that he recently had a flashback to his childhood when he was going to school, in private schools in France and Europe. And there was a classmate that was there just for a period of time, who was known in Europe and all the private schools as being the biggest troublemaker in existence. And he was thrown out from one school to the next. He came from a privileged home, So they had the money, but he just did not subject himself to the rules of any school. He finally ends up in this school. All the kids know he's coming to this particular school in Paris, and everyone's excited to wait to see what kind of troublemaker he's going to do. The first day in class, a fellow, my friend, is sitting with me. His name is Richard. Tells me that everyone's watching to see. Well, he's very well behaved, quiet. The class goes on and on. Everyone's waiting. When is the outburst? Where's going to be the first act of defiance? Finally, at the end of the class, the bell's about to ring. The boy raises his hand. And the teacher says, yes. He says, let me tell you something. I've been sitting and listening now I'm listening to you for the last hour. And I have to tell you, you're a terrible teacher. Okay. The class is ready. There it's coming. And the teacher's like stunned. He says, but there's hope. If you come to my house tonight, I will show you how to become a better teacher. The place burst out, you can imagine. And of course, this student was expelled immediately for the nerve. And that was it. They never heard from him again. But Richard was interested in knowing what happened to him. He said he either became a great criminal or he became a great achiever. He looked up his name and Googled it and found it that he was the head of the creative programming or something, innovative program or something like strategic initiatives or new initiatives, the head of new initiatives at the New York Public Library. And in it writes that he's a disruptive influence in a positive way, that he's a force that always looks at things and sees things that where others do not see them, and is able to come up with ideas that the regular thinking people do not come up with. Exactly what he was when he was that kid in school. So he could have turned out to be a monster, and he maybe still is, but in a way he channeled it into this type of thinking. So both from two perspectives you see the idea of night vision. First of all, if a good teacher would have seen that, they'd seen his potential, and maybe that's what ended up happening with him. And secondly, he himself was a person that had this type of night vision, a little counter, like a counter force to conventional thinking, a counter-conventional thinking, if that's the right word. So he counters the status quo, challenges it. And that's how we have to look at ourselves and our children and everyone around us. People have tremendous energy within them. Some of it shines like the sun, it's obvious, it's clear, and so on. And some of it shines like the moon. It goes through changes and shifts and can disappear. But it carries within it a mystique, the real mystique of life, which is going on underneath the surface of our souls. So yes, there are moon souls and there are sun souls. All of us have both, but some are primary. That's why you have night people, you have day people. People who are just night feglach, as they call them, night birds. People have different. Some people are very consistent like the sun. Some people are very shifty, very spontaneous like the moon. You need both. The sun has its benefits, but the moon does as well. And the moon's benefits are sometimes harder to discern. So in this month, in this period of time, that's when we discover that. And the comparison to Yom Kippur is obvious as well if you think about it now. Why? What is Yom Kippur? Why is Yom Kippur the holiest day of the year? It's connected directly to the 15th of Av. I'll tell you why. The Yom Kippur was born out of darkness. The holiest day of the year because it's the birth of hope. And you probably remember me saying this many times. The book 60 Days is based on this as well. The Jews leave Egypt. 49 days later they receive the Torah at Sinai on the 50th day. So 50 days from the leaving of Egypt. 40 days Moses is up on the mountain studying the Torah. He comes down with the tablets, the 2 tablets that God had given him, the 10 commandments that the Jews had heard on Shavuos on the 50th day. But lo and behold, to his chagrin, and he's already aware of it because God sent him down, the Jews had built a golden calf. They betrayed God. Ultimate betrayal, ultimate form of spiritual adultery. And they built a golden calf. Another God, you just heard, don't build false gods. That's what they did. Moses shatters the tablets intentionally, mind you, in order to say later that they didn't receive the contract yet, so there's some hope. He reprimands them and runs back up the mountain to God. The 17th of Tammuz, the beginning of the 3 weeks, is when he shatters the tablets. Goes up on the mountain, stays there for 40 days, including Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the year, the 9 days, all begging God to forgive the people. But he's not successful until Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is 40 days from the 17th of Tammuz. He comes back sadly without success, but goes right back up the next day. Different opinions. for another 40 days. So 40 days, 50 days from the exodus from Egypt to receiving the Torah, 40 days from the receiving of the Torah to shattering the tablets, 40 days of unsuccessful praying and beseeching God, including during the 9 days and the 3 weeks and so on. And then on Rosh Chodesh El, he goes back up on the mountain the third time. When does he come down? 40 days from Rosh Chodesh El is Yom Kippur. With what? With the second tablets in hand. He prevailed. As we will say, as we say in Yom Kippur, and we will say always Yom Kippur, after Kol Nidre, Salachti Kidvarecha. V'daber Hashem, God says, Salachti, I have forgiven them, Kidvarecha, as you, Moses, have spoken. Moses prevailed over God to reunite, to reconcile with the people after their betrayal. Exactly the story of Tisha B'Av and the 15th of Av. After betrayal, after the wound, after the dignity being defiled, the rebirth of the moon, the full moon. So 15th of Av, in its microcosmic way, in Av, is the beginnings of what later would become Yom Kippur compared to the whole period in time. So though the 15th of Av, Moses was still in the mountain, but the birth, as I said, is in Av. Av is Aryeh, the birth of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Hoshana Rabbah, all about the reconciliation. Elul begins the month of Virgo, becomes the month of Psula, the month of love and compassion, and the month of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy, that begin the reconciliation. All are born when? In Av. So in Av itself, you have so-called a mini Yom Kippur, if you wish. The Lo Yom Tev Yisrael, like Yom Kippur, 15th of Av, and Yom Kippur. 15th of Av is mentioned first, Chamishas Av, Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim is called Yom Chasunase Zemat Tar. This is the day of our marriage, our betrothal. Even though at Sinai was the marriage, but the consummation was at Yom Kippur. And Purim is Kippurim, is the real consummation when they accept it willingly, which is another discussion. But Yom Kippur is that consummation, and the 15th of Av, in the month of Av, is the full moon that is beginning to give hope after the 9th of Av, when the moon was diminished. So the night vision emerges a message of hope, a message of seeing things where others don't see them. Open our eyes. That's the lesson. Open your eyes. Next time you meet somebody, whether you know them or a stranger, look with new set of eyes. Look with night vision. Maybe close your eyes actually and see what you see. You may see things in them that your open eyes to daylight with sunlight would not see. Look at yourself. Instead of looking in the mirror where you see obviously the obvious, which is again daylight and sunlight, even if there's not artificial light burning, look at yourself with close your eyes, and what do you see? Who are you? Henry Kissinger writes that when Nixon resigned due to the Watergate scandal, so purportedly he was walking out ready to go sign the resignation. They prayed together. He asked Kissinger to pray with him. And he stopped by the famous portrait of JFK in one of the halls of the White House, in that pensive mode where he's sitting on a chair with his chin in his arm, contemplating. Beloved JFK assassinated, Camelot, and this is purportedly what he said to the portrait. He muttered. He said, "They love you because you remind them of who they want to be. They hate me because I remind them who they are." So there's who you are and who you want to be, who you could be. The sun may tell you who you are. The moon tells you who you could be. So we come towards the 15th of Av this week with a lesson of understanding and appreciating ourselves, the world, in a new way when you look with night vision. Now it's true that the moon is being reflecting the light of the sun. That makes it even more intriguing because it's not its own thing. Les la megar klum, the Zohar says. It has Malchus, and the moon has no light of its own. But that makes it even more fascinating. Why? It doesn't have light of its own. And when it reflects the sun, it doesn't reflect it just like a mirror image. It's a new type of light. So the sun is also part of it. The sun is feeding it. But it's feeding it in a refractive way, in a refractive light that the moon offers us. Is that when you look at something, so look at it with the sun, but then go a step further. Look at it with the moon, with moon eyes, not just with sun eyes. Look with the night vision. Look deeper into it and see what potential it has. Everything has much more potential and enormous potency than we can ever imagine. So may God bless everybody to open their eyes and look at things this way, maximize and take advantage and tap into the energy of this time. Begin studying, increasing in studying Torah, as the Talmud says, that from the 50th night and on, as the nights get longer in Israel, and in most of the Western, this hemisphere, the upper hemisphere, that is, northern hemisphere they call it. May we also increase in study of Torah. Yarech Yomim, it says that when you increase in Torah, you add in life. And that's the message of the evening and the night. The night has that power to ability to us to grow in that particular way. This has been Simon Jacobson, Wednesday night broadcast. Next week we will, please God, be together on location as well as the broadcast. If you have any questions, if you have follow-up, any way we can help you discover this night vision, to look at yourself and at the events in your life and others in your life and the world in general in deeper ways, please reach to us. We're here to help in any way possible. We are partners in this journey. It's always an honor to intersect and to be involved in any spiritual journey, and to help us all discover that enormous potential that lies within us and within our life's experiences. Everyone have a very blessed week, and until next week, Simon Jacobson. Thank you.